Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane. I'm the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and I am excited to be here with John Charles for our second talk on his romance recommendations. And we're going to get to him in just a second. But before we do get to him, just a couple things. I want to say thanks to the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. I'd also like to thank John for letting us share this program with other libraries because more and more libraries are promoting their romance authors, and I'm so here for it. So I appreciate that. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, which is a button at the bottom of your screen. If you just want to chat with each other, feel free to do that through the chat. I will be sort of paying attention to it, but questions I tend to pick up from the Q&A. So John is going to be spending some time talking about his favorite books from this last year. And please use the chat to let us know what your favorite books from this last year have been. I will send out a list of those books after the session so that you don't have to take notes if you don't want to. But of course, note taking is never discouraged, I'll say. So John Charles, like I said, is here. He was a librarian, currently works at the Poison Pen in Scottsdale, Arizona, and has been reviewing for Booklist
Booklist.
forever.
Yeah, 25 years.
That's right. And Library Journal, same amount of time?
Yes, but not romance for them.
Okay, so Booklist, romance. So as you can tell, he's going to be like the perfect person to talk to us about the best romances that he's enjoyed and that you may as well. John, thank you so much for being here again. I had such a blast at our talk last year.
Thank you for inviting me again, Mina. It was delightful. Once I got over my bad case of nerves, and we'll try to conquer that again this year. So excuse me if I falter, but remembering a lot of stuff is getting harder as we age. Um, I do have a lot of great book suggestions for everyone this year. I thought I'd start off with holiday books because we're creeping closer and closer to our holidays, even though it seems like publishers have started releasing holiday romances now in August. So you have plenty of choices to look for. But my first book was
Oh,
a
in
surprise.
August, I'm sorry, they're out there with the Halloween candy in August.
Oh, I know. It's like, well, actually, I think I saw next year there's going to be a couple holiday romances coming out in July. So you can do Christmas in July, I guess, for that
I'm here for
purpose.
that too.
There you go. Me, I'm more traditional. I only read Christmas romances and holiday romances in November and December. But we've got a lot of good choices. My first one was a surprise to me. I've never read her, but I'm going to go back to her backlist. It's called Love You a Lot," by
Mhm.
Amanda Elliott. In this particular book, our protagonist is New Yorker Abby Cohen, who's moved to a small town in Vermont for romantic reasons, but that didn't turn out. So instead, she bought a coffee shop and she's trying to live her best life there, with the exception of one particular customer who keeps coming into her coffee shop, Seth Abrams. Seth is like a thorn under her skin, that annoying little gnat that buzzes around her because he's perpetually cheerful. It doesn't matter what happens. 9 o'clock in the morning, somebody spills coffee on him, he sees the silver lining in it. Abby runs out of his favorite type of beans. That's okay. He'll try something different. It just annoys Abby to no end. And that's not the only thing annoying Abby, because the local tourism bureau has decided that this year, instead of a Christmas festival, they're going to do a Hanukkah celebration. And the chairwoman of the tourism board has decided that since Abby is the only Jewish person on their committee, she needs to head that particular celebration.
Hmm.
Well, Abby is thrilled with the idea that they're doing something different, but for reasons that the reader will discover later in the book, she's not exactly up close and personal with her own Jewish faith at this particular point in time, which means she needs to find somebody that can help connect her with the vendors that she needs for the festival, the arts and crafts people, the food people, all that. So, in desperation, she goes to one of those neighborhood app things that are so popular and puts out a pleasing. If there's anyone Jewish in a 100-mile radius, please respond to me. I need help desperately. Well, only one person replies, and guess who that person is? Seth Abrams. And Seth is more than happy to help connect Abby with all the vendors she needs, but he has a caveat. He needs something from her. Seth's mother has been nagging him for years to bring home a nice Jewish girl for the holidays. So if Abby agrees to be his girlfriend for Hanukkah and go to New York, he'll connect her with the vendors and help her set up the festival. That's the premise of the book. It's wonderful. There's a lot of kind of snarky humor to Amanda's writing. There's a lot about the Jewish festival of Hanukkah, the foods that are associated with it. She's particularly good with that. And Seth and Abby turn out to be one of those wonderfully charming couples. So if you're looking for something a little bit different this holiday, Love You a Lot, Kate by Amanda Elliott is just up your alley.
How did you hear about that book?
Review, actually.
You wrote a review.
No, I didn't review it, but Publishers Weekly, I think, gave it a starred review or something like that. So, and I know it's like we all have 10 million books we want to read, but we can't help ourselves from finding more to add to it. But no, I was surprised too. It's just every once in a while you just serendipity comes up and you find the particular book that's just perfect for you. And usually I try a few pages just to see the voice if it connects with me, and it did. But
Mhm.
she's a really interesting writer. I can't wait to see what she does next.
So Publishers Weekly, is that available to the public?
Yeah, you can actually well, if your local public library doesn't subscribe to it, which is how I used to get it, you can sign up for like a short version, like an e-newsletter. I think it's PW Daily or something like that. And Monday through Friday, they'll send you news about the publishing world, and then they send you like their starred reviews, like
Yeah,
a list of those. So you don't get the full issue, but you get a taste of it, and it's free. So definitely sign up for that.
I like free. So at some point today, I'd like to talk about other places that where we can find good romance recommendations.
Sure. Um, my next holiday romance I did read and review, so that's how I discovered it. It's called The Merriest Misters by Timothy
Oh,
Janowski.
I love him.
He is funny. He's got a very distinctive voice. In this particular book, Quinn Muller and Patrick Hargrove's marriage is on the rocks, and it being Christmas is not helping matters. As the two are trying to sort whether or not they're going to stay together, something happens that puts even more stress on their marriage. Patrick wakes Quinn up late Christmas Eve and tells him he's just killed someone. Well, of course, that's really going to put stress on your marriage. So Quinn goes down to the kitchen with Patrick. It turns out that the burglar Patrick thought he had brained him with a frying pan, was actually not dead. He was still alive, and he was Santa Claus. So in this particular case, the the person Santa Claus that was there was not happy about this turn of events. It's the straw that broke his camel's back. He said, "I'm done with Christmas. I'm out of here." He stomps off. Quinn and Patrick are left in their kitchen wondering what exactly happened when an elf from the North Pole appears and tells Quinn and Patrick that if Patrick doesn't take over Santa's duties for the night, that Christmas is going to be canceled. Children, boys and girls around the world will be disappointed. It's all on them. What can they do but say yes? So Patrick just plays the role of Santa. Quinn helps him out. They get through Christmas. Everything's done. They think it's over when they find out that it's not. The elves at the North Pole need Patrick to be Santa Claus, at least for another year until they can find a replacement. And because Santa Claus has a helper, Mrs. Claus, they want Quinn to be Patrick's helper at his merriest mister, is I guess is the term that they use for him. So that's the setup of the story. It's very different. It's unique. Most of it's set at the North Pole. You meet a lot of the previous Santas and their spouses that live there. So it's got this really intriguing, different kind of holiday setting, but it's also about the sharing the holidays with your family and friends, the importance of finding someone to cherish during the holiday period. So it's a different kind of holiday story, very fun, very unique. The Merriest Misters by Timothy Janowski.
Now he wrote your main one, Matthew Prince.
Yes, that was one of his other holiday books.
Yeah, that was awesome. I really enjoyed that one last year. So I was looking forward to this one.
He's got a really good voice. Um, the next one I want to do because I don't want to anyone to miss it because it was one of my favorite holiday books this year is called Regency Glad Tidings by Carla Kelly.
Oh, I love
I
Carla.
know, I do. I discovered her in the 90s when she was writing traditional regencies for Signet, and I've never been disappointed by any of her books. She wrote a number of really great Regency Christmas stories for Signet Penguin. And this is very much in that vein. It's a collection of three novellas. The first novella is called Holly and Ivy, and in that particular one, the Napoleonic Wars are ending. British surgeon Jack Frost is finally going to be able to go home and enjoy his life, open his practice. He just has one last duty. He has to escort his hypochondriac captain home. The man was slightly injured in battle. It was like a nick or something, but he's playing it up and he insists that Jack take him home, make sure he's settled before he'll release him from duty. So Jack does that, and he thinks, all I have to do is get this man home, settled at his estate, and I'm out of there until he meets the man's fiance. And he discovers there's a reason why he wants to stay. It's a beautifully sweet story because the woman has been told all of her life that the best she can hope for is to settle for this blowhard and that she should be thanking her lucky stars. And then she meets Jack and sees that there's another future for her in store. The other two stories are really charming and sweet as well. One involves a woman who's down on her luck. She answers an advertisement for a shop girl and she turns the shop around. Basically, it's been kind of slowly fading into obscurity, but the shop owner's nephew thinks she's a con woman out to fleece his aunt of all her funds. So that sets up the story in Picture a Christmas, and then in Yours Sincerely, the heroine is down on her luck as well financially, but she's managing to keep things afloat. She helps out her neighbors, one of whom is an elderly gentleman who corresponds with his nephew, an American sea captain. She helps him write his letters. She helps him read them to him when he gets letters from the nephew. So she thinks she knows this man. Then the gentleman passes away and his nephew comes to settle the estate. And she realizes she knows nothing about him from the letters, but she's even more intrigued. I mean, they're just what I love about Carla's books is she doesn't write about diamonds of the first water or dukes with massive estates. These are middle class people, tradespeople, people down on their luck, like the woman in the third story, who manage to find love with someone who really sees them for who they are. It's just, they're wonderful. They
Mhm.
encapsulate it all, right?
So I've been reading Carla also for a very long time, and I see Kitty's here, and she is a huge Carla fan as well. Actually, Carla came to our rom-con this last year, and we had such a blast together. And she's doing a virtual program with us in March. But you, her books have really stood the test of time.
Mhm.
And she's written different things like, naval officers, Western, not Western, but
Mhm.
like American Westerns type of things like that. Um, what do you think it is about her books, other than the fact that she doesn't write about like the billionaires and the dukes, that just keeps us intrigued with what she writes?
Because she sees that, I think what she sees is that romance is possible for anyone. It's
Mhm.
not just for the beautiful or the wealthy or the famous. It's a shop girl can find it. The one of the heroines in this novella has, I'm not sure the technical term, but I think it's lazy eye, which has kind of made her a scorn of her relatives and her neighbors. But the man sees beyond that to who she is and what a wonderful person she is. She just her writing is very sincere. It's very they're emotional, but they're not saccharine. They're it's hard to describe, but she just really she's almost like Jane Austen in a sense for our times.
Yeah. I find that I like her short stories, especially because she says so much in like, a sentence
That's it.
versus like me, I'd go on for a paragraph or two. She just like says it in one thing.
She's impeccable with her historical details. She's really great about that. So you can't catch her ever on not being accurate. Yeah, she's an amazing writer. I wish more people knew about her. And the other great thing about this particular book is if you're busy during the holidays, novellas are great because you can read one in an hour or two
Mhm.
and go on to something else.
That's right. I actually, I'm just gonna take another second, is one of
Sure.
my very favorite books of all time, and a lot of people here will agree with me, is Lord of Scoundrels by Loretta
Red
Chase.
Chase, yeah.
But Carla's Reforming Lord Ragsdale is right up there with me with that for me. I don't know if you've read it, but it's truly an amazing story.
It is. The one that if I had to drag one to a desert island with me, would be Miss Whittier. Miss Whittier makes the list just because the heroine is American. The hero is a British sea captain. It's Regency times, but the Regency was also during the War of 1812. So
Hmm.
they're like opposite sides of this political geographic dispute, and how they come together is just amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Or they're unexpected as well. Like
Yes.
she writes things that you would just never, at the time, never would have expected in a romance.
Yeah, she's amazing.
Yeah.
Perfect gift.
Mhm.
The next one is another one of my favorite holiday romances this year, Christmas is All Around by Martha Waters.
I love her.
Yeah, I mean, she's written four amazing historical regencies, and I love her, even though she is a former librarian. That's not the only reason that we love Martha. She's just an exceptional writer. I loved her regencies because they're kind of like 1930s screwball comedies slipped into a Regency time period. She has such a wonderful sense of humor. They're just bright and snappy, and the banter is great. And I heard she was writing a new book, and then I got a little bit apprehensive because I heard it was contemporary. And some authors can't transition from one subgenre to the other. They just don't have that skill set. But fortunately, Martha does. I can say without any hesitation, her new book is just as wonderful as her last. In this particular book, the heroine is Charlotte Lane, and Charlotte Lane hates the holidays. It all goes back to when she was a child. Her family was big in the acting profession and they pushed her into the movie business. Charlotte did one film and one film only, Christmas Truly, when she played one of those precocious children who celebrates the holidays. She hated it. She dropped acting, went into art as her passion. But the film, while it was not commercially successful or financially successful, at first became a cult favorite. So over the years, like the last 20 years, it's got that status where everyone loves it. They play it on repeat on the channels. It's just a holiday tradition, which makes it even worse for Charlotte because rumors have come out that they're planning a sequel. And rumors also have come out that Charlotte is standing in the way of the movie. So Charlotte's getting all these angry emails from Christmas Truly fans, like, why are you ruining my holidays? I want this movie. She needs to get out of town. She's in New York. So she decides she's going to spend the holidays in London with her sister. She gets to London, things seem to be going okay. No one's paying any attention to her. They're doing a few holiday things like a Christmas tree lighting ceremony at a stately home called Eden Priory. And Charlotte arrives at the stately home, and that's when she realizes, oh no, that particular stately home was used as a scene in Christmas Truly. So now she's got to hide from everybody. She's in a corner in a cupboard behind the stairs when a man in a reindeer suit comes by to change out of his costume, and it happens to be the owner of the stately home, Graham Calloway. Fortunately, he seems not to know Charlotte from the movie at all, but he's intrigued by the idea that she's an artist. He wants to hire her, commission her to do a print of Eden Priory that they can sell to help raise funds to keep the estate running. So Charlotte kind of breathes a sigh of relief. She'd love to do this artwork. But the question is, how long can she keep her secret from Graham? So that's the premise. It's all about Christmas in London, Christmas with the holidays, um, how some of those movies become so near and dear to people, like Love Actually, I think is one of the ones that you could probably imagine. But it's also got, I mean, you can just picture this with Hugh Grant in it or something like that. It's just got that British charm to it. It's Christmas is All Around by Martha Waters. This is one holiday romance I would read any time of year. It's that good.
So, why do you think that Martha is so good at balancing the humor um, with the heart? Because I do really like her books, and I don't find them slapsticky at all. So,
No,
what is that about her?
timing, I guess, maybe a sense of comic timing,
Hmm.
the precision with her language. She's very precise about how she words things and things like that. I think For me, in the end, it all comes down to voice. When you're reading a book as a reader, either you connect with the author and their voice or you don't. And they can be the greatest plotter in the world or have this intriguing twists or things like that. But if you don't resonate, if the voice doesn't resonate with you, that doesn't do it. And I just love her voice. To me, it reminds me of like Philadelphia Story or something like that. It's got that quick wit, the banter, the kind of characters that seem superficial, but actually have a great deal of depth to them.
Mhm. That's really interesting because I love the Philadelphia story. And, like what I mean, what I was going to say is that there's such a difference between something like the Philadelphia story and something like the Three Stooges, right?
Yes.
I mean, they're worlds apart and there's
Yeah.
humor in both of them, but
Mhm.
Martha is so much more on this side than this side. I mean, I like a good slapstick I mean,
Yeah.
occasion, but
No, yeah, and I mean, there are some romance authors that veer towards the more physical comedy kind of thing in their stories, and they're quite good at it. But yeah, she's more cerebral, I guess would be her approach to comedy.
yeah. Can you talk a little bit about when you say voice, it makes me think of the audiobooks. Do you ever get a chance to listen to the audiobooks of these books that you're enjoying?
Okay, now I'm going to reveal my terrible secret to you, Mina. Then it will go cross viral across the internet. I hate audiobooks. I
Okay,
know.
we have to end this session right now.
I have a very dear friend who loves them. I have actually know a lot of people who love them. I tried them once, like 20 years or so ago, and it's just that people kept saying, "Oh, you can listen to books and you can do the dishes or garden or do." I can't. I have to sit and listen to it as it's being told. So for me, it's much easier just to read. But I know there are people that are passionate about it. So,
Well, I interestingly only listen to books I've already read.
oh,
So I already know the story. I'm in it for the performance. And it's just so much fun that way because, if I am like vacuuming and I start daydreaming or whatever, I don't mind because I know what's going to happen. And I love to reread and I just never have time. So it's perfect for me. But yeah, I would never, well, I cannot read them cold. I can't listen to them cold because I would miss half the book.
I never thought about that as a rereading or re-listening kind of experience, but I'll have to consider that.
You do that, John. If we have do this again next year, I will ask you again.
Just finding the time is the next part of the equation. But my next book, that holiday book that I'll share with you, is The Christmas Cookie Wars by Eliza Evans. If your idea of heaven is binge watching Hallmark holiday films, this is the book for you. In it, Melody Monroe has just learned from her two twin sons that have come home that the school's annual holiday Christmas celebration has been canceled. Now, there's a problem because this celebration, Cookie Days, funds all the different programs for the school throughout the year. So, of course, Melody is not going to let this just lie. She goes to the school, sets up a meeting with the principal, who happens to be Jonathan Braxton, and demands to know why the school is canceling Cookie Days. And Jonathan, the principal, tells her, well, it's because the chairwoman of the committee, who's been running it for years and years, has quit in a huff. Essentially, something happened in the committee. She wasn't being treated with the respect she thought. So she's just decided she's out of here. She ends it. No one else is willing to take up the mantle and take charge of the committee. So Melody thinks, well, how difficult can it be? I mean, it's just a cookie committee. I may not know how to bake. I may not know all these different things, but I'll give it a shot. So she agrees to chair the committee, but that's just the start of her problems because it turns out the former chairwoman is determined to derail any efforts to get the committee back on track. She's got her feelings hurt and she's determined to let everyone know it. And Melody will also have to participate in a cookie off with the top cookie baker in town, which happens to be Jonathan Braxton, the principal. So that's the premise. There's a town that celebrates the holidays, lots of food and cooking. Someone who doesn't know how to bake falls in love with someone who's got the recipe that's won the last 3 years. It's sweet, it's charming. If you have romance readers who definitely wants a love story that doesn't involve a lot of steam, a lot of heat, but does have very sweet kind of holiday romantic emotions. This is the book for them, The Christmas Cookie Wars by Eliza Evans.
So I forgot to ask you about the heat in the other books. Could you just go back really quickly and be like, 1 to 5. One is
And
like
if I-
super sweet. One is,
Carla Kelly sweet,
yes.
definitely. So there's no heat in that. Christmas is all around, probably a 2 on a scale to 5. Mary's Misters, 2, 3 maybe. Love You a Lot, Pay 2 or 3. None of them are super steamy so far. They're traditional romance things, but definitely if you prefer the door closed, Cookie Christmas Cookie Wars is the one for you, or Carla Kelly's Regency,
Mhm.
the collection.
We had a comment here about a book. Oh yeah. Caitlin listened to Christmas Inn set on the Cape. It was super sweet, clean, and discussed wine and cheese to a level I have never experienced before. I love
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I definitely, if you like baking, the Christmas Cookie Wars is going to be your cup of tea, so to speak. It's got a lot in there. However, if you want a holiday Christmas story that definitely gives you the steam, lots of heat, then The Christmas Tree Farm
Oh,
by
have that on my TBR.
Lori Gilmore is the book for you. I had, to be honest, I had no expectations of this book. I just know it was very popular. It somehow the author had sprung out of nowhere. At least I hadn't been paying attention. So I'm kind of predisposed to judge it and say, well, it can't be any good because too many people like it. I've never heard of it, etc. It turns out she's really a smart, funny writer, but there is a lot of steam to it. In this particular book, the heroine is Kira North, and she's had a serious case of buyer's remorse because she's bought a Christmas tree farm sight unseen. She arrives at the farm, discovers it's ramshackle, run down, needs lots of work, but she's sunk all of her money into it. So she has to find a way to make the Christmas tree farm profitable. The problem is Kira has ticked off everyone in the nearby town with her grumpy, kind of reclusive nature. So she's not going to sell a lot of trees, but it turns out there's one person who's not put off by her, and that happens to be a neighbor who's out walking his dogs, Bennett Ellis. He stumbles across the Christmas tree farm, discovers Kira, and he's more than happy to help her kind of win back the residents of the town, help make the Christmas tree farm a success. So he's the nice guy. So in this case, it's one of those grumpy sunshine romances, but the heroine is the grumpy one. The hero is the sunshine. It's
Mhm.
got lots about the holidays. There's previous characters from her 2 other books, which are the Cinnamon Bun Bookstore, which has a romance book club in it, and
Mhm.
Pumpkin Spice Cafe. Great characters, a lot of snarky humor, definitely hot enough to keep you warm during a cold winter season. The Christmas Tree Farm by Lori Gilmore.
I read the Cinnamon Bun book. It was awesome.
She's got a really, again, we're back to voice for that.
Mhm. Yeah, and you know that I hate to say this, but like the titles can be a little bit off-putting because you're just like, is this just fluff, whatever. So I'm going to go back to my question about where do we learn about books that we could potentially like? Because you can't always go by the cover and the blurbs are useless to me nowadays. So
Mhm.
how do we find good books?
Um, Many different ways. One way is through programs like yours, which educate readers and librarians. Um, if you have a public library, you can always ask your local staff there. A local independent bookstore, even Barnes and Nobles, can sometimes help hear you. But professional publications are one route. Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, Booklist. The New York Times Book Review does romance reviews. I think it's every month or every 6 weeks, and they're written by Olivia Waite, who's actually a romance writer. She wrote some exceptional sapphic romances for Avon, I think it was, a few years ago. Really smart writer, and she does a very interesting take on that. So I look at that. Also, just try to find people who read what you like and get their recommendations. I know that's kind of a simplistic answer, but find a coworker who may have an interest like yours, or a relative or something like that. You probably have suggestions too.
Mhm. So in the chat, we're hearing that blurbs are not like can be tricky because they might
Yeah,
tell too much but for me, blurbs are by other authors. And so I never know if they're just helping a friend or, whatever. So
yeah.
there's that. But there are places as well. Like I follow Sarah McLean, who has an
Yeah.
amazing blog
Mhm.
of book recommendations. Kristen Higgins also does.
Yeah.
But also I really like some bloggers like was it Trashy Bitches, whatever.
Oh, smart, something trashy. Smart bitches, trashy books.
Yes.
Yes.
Sarah Wendell, she's great. Uh, what is it? It used to be Lori Likes Books, but now it's
Yeah.
you know what I'm
I
talking about.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to look around the internet for sites and things like that. The one thing I always caution to readers like myself is just because everyone else loves something doesn't mean you will too. I mean, there's one particular book that's been sweeping through the poison pen. Half the staff love it. Readers are claiming over it. It's the Richard Osman book. I can't think. I tried like the first chapter. I thought it was the most boring thing I've ever read in my life. So, I mean, that's just me. It could have been me at that particular point in time when I was reading it. I wasn't ready for the book. It could be I'm never going to be ready for it. But take reviews with a grain of salt. My suggestion is always try the first couple pages just to see if you're intrigued. That can usually let you know.
Right. It was called Catherine Says We Solve Murders by Richard
Yes.
Osman. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like there's oftentimes as a librarian, people will be like, it's a huge long wait list for this book. And I finally get my hands on it. I'm like,
Yeah.
it was overhyped. It
Yes.
was a good book, but it was overhyped.
Hmm.
Benny Colgan, love her. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I find that if I can find one or two reviewers online that read similar like things that I like, then I just follow them for the most part and just try to read it. Or as you said, find friends that read similarly to like our romance book club. People will generally go with friend recommendations because sometimes you can be led astray. As I told you earlier, I had been by a
Mhm.
book and I was very mad. But
Sometimes it also works out if you find someone who loves books that you hate, then you can use that too. It's like if they're raving about this book, then there's a chance you're probably not going to like it just because your tastes don't coincide.
right. And then there's like the running after trends kind of thing.
Mhm.
We were just talking about this as romantasy is like this big thing, but is it?
Well, I think sometimes, at least from the bookstore's perspective, um, there are so many people out there that are looking for something good to read and they don't know how to find it. So they're latching on anything. And if it's on the bestseller list, they're assuming that it has to be good because everyone else has read it and that so they buy a copy and that perpetuates the book's rise on the bestseller list. Sometimes they just need someone to listen to them, which is what you as librarians do, and say, no, it sounds like this is not actually what you're thinking of, but maybe this other author. So yeah, it's tough.
It is, yeah. And as you said, there's so many books coming out, and some of them are. We can talk about this some other time, but that spectrum of romance to women's
Mhm.
fiction that we were talking about before we started is where that women's romance is starting to, fall into that spectrum. And so, like sometimes they don't actually have a happily ever after for, a
Mhm.
true blue romance reader. That is like throw that book against the wall.
Mhm. And there are some readers like Jojo Moyes. People loved her. Me Before You. It's like other readers, not so much. Yeah. Fortunately, there's a lot for us to choose from. I guess that's
Yeah.
the silver lining.
I think the question is, and we were talking about this with The Wedding People by Alison Elspeth, is that if you know what it is going in, if you know that it's women's fiction versus romance, then you can enjoy it for the book it is. But if it's promoted as a romance and it doesn't have a happily ever after, then it's maddening.
Mhm.
Yeah. Charlene, you can read other stuff by Jojo Moyes. Just know that it's not
Oh,
a.
I loved her last letter to a lover, something like
Mhm.
I thought that it's not a romance, but I thought that was actually an amazing book for that.
I,
So
Kitty says Linda Howard, absolutely one of my favorite authors, although she definitely has that alpha male. You have to be able to deal with it.
yeah. One more holiday book before we move on. It's called I'll Be Gone for Christmas by Georgia K. Boone. New discovery to me. In this particular book, we're introduced to B. Tyler, who has a twin, Beth. They're both running a high-tech company in San Francisco. Bee and Beth might be identical twins, but they're nothing alike in personality. Beth is very methodical, very analytical. She's attention to detail. She makes their business run smoothly. Beth is more, let's say, free-spirited, whimsical, chaotic, her twin sister might call her, and she's recently made a big blunder. She's muffed things up with a client. She knows spending Christmas with Beth is going to be a nightmare because Beth will be nitpicking over every single thing that she's done wrong. So when one of her friends tells her about a new swap app called Vacate, where you trade your home for the holidays with someone else, Beth thinks, here's my escape hatch. She puts her place into Vacate, gets a reply from Clover Mills, who's actually hoping to get away for the holidays too, because Clover lives in a small town in Ohio. It's been a tough year. Her mother passed away recently. She's still dealing with that. She's broken up with her fiance, whom everyone insists was perfect for her, but who Clover knows was not the right man for her. So she would love to get out of the small town she lives in and in someplace exciting, big, new, bright, noisy, like San Francisco. So the two swap homes for the holidays. Bee goes to Ohio, Clover comes to San Francisco. In the process, both discover what they were looking for, both in terms of their life and in terms of their romantic future. It's really interesting. There's a great cast of characters to the book, some intriguing secondary characters. You've got that small town Christmas stories thread. You've got the big city celebration thread tied into that too. I guess I kind of describe it as if you love the book, is it The Holiday, where they swap homes for the Christmas? It would be like that
Mhm.
particular in a book format.
I did love
Yes.
that book, that movie, so I will
I'll
definitely.
Be Home for Christmas by Georgia K. Boone.
Thank you.
Mhm. Now, it's not just all holiday books, because when you're giving books to readers or even giving yourself the gift of a book, sometimes you just want something good, no matter what time of the year it is. So I have a few books I'd like to share with you that I've read throughout the year that really stuck with me. And I'll start with, oh,
I love that he's got a library cart right behind him.
I know I tried to be organized. Cat Sebastian's You Should Be So Lucky. I love her books. This is no exception. This one's set in the 1960s. She picks up a secondary character from the previous book and introduces him. And what the character Mark Bailey has been doing is basically sleepwalking through life for the last year. He works as a newspaper reporter, but there's been something that happened to him that kind of he's still processing, hasn't gotten over. His boss hopes that a new assignment will kind of jar Mark back into the real world. And what he wants him to do is ghostwrite a series of articles in the form of diary entries for the New York Robins' new shortstop, Eddie O'Leary. So Mark, who has no interest at all in sports, has to meet with the shortstop who's having the worst batting slump in his history and figure out how to write these columns. And Mark is prepared to hate Eddie because everything he's learned about him is that he's temperamental, judgmental, argumentative, nothing that he looks for in a person. But when he meets Mark, he actually discovers that he's quite different. He's sweet, he's kind, he's thoughtful. And Mark and Eddie share another thing in common, something that if it got out could ruin Eddie's professional career. So that's the premise of You Should Be So Lucky by Cat Sebastian. It's got this wonderful 1960s setting. It's got thoughtful characters that just you really make you think about things. Their romance is not easily won. It takes a lot of work on both of their parts, but it's very satisfying. You Should Be So Lucky by Cat Sebastian.
I love Cat Sebastian. I'm so glad that you brought her up.
Yeah, she's amazing. I can't wait for her next book.
I love
Uh,
that she writes like such different books every single time. You
mhm.
just never know what you're going to get from her, except that you know it's going to be great.
No, you don't. And she doesn't sugarcoat how being in a relationship of that kind in that time period could be. There's nothing romantic about it in terms of there's very real kind of problems and issues that they have to work through. But she does it really with a deftness that I admire.
Mhm.
The next one is a debut. It's called How to End a Love Story by Yulin Kwong.
Mhm.
And I hope I'm getting her name right. If I'm not, I apologize. In this particular book, Grant Shepard is a screenwriter, television screenwriter. He's had a very successful career and up until now, but he's been going through a drought. And he gets notice from his agent. They want him to work on a new television production based on a best-selling series of books called the Ivy Papers. Now, there's only one problem with this. It's a great opportunity. It could be a long-term career success for Grant, but the person in charge of producing the television series, he has a history with, and it happens to be Helen Zwang. Grant knew Helen's younger sister back in the day. There was um, a tragic accident that Grant was involved in, but not responsible for, that took the life of Helen's sister. And they've never really come to terms with that until now. So the two of them have that history. The question is, can they work together? And then we add another layer in that Grant and Helen discover they have real feelings for each other. It's a very interesting romance. What I loved about it is the author Yulin has worked in television, so there's a lot of background about writing for television, the business of getting things that rings very true because she knows what she's talking about. It's also, she doesn't hesitate to delve into the real issue. I mean, how can you love someone if you know they were involved with the death of someone else that you loved? There's that real question to it. There's kind of a soberness to the story that doesn't detract from the romanticism of it. It is a romance, I will say that. So you don't have to worry, Mina. It's not going to disappoint you in that sense. But I was really impressed by it as a debut.
Mhm. It kind of reminds me of I was on a total Catherine Center binge this last year, and she also writes very, difficult situations that people pull themselves out of.
Yeah, that I think that's a good analogy for that.
Hmm.
Okay.
Catherine Center, she's great.
Another relatively new author. This is her second book. Her first book just came out last year. It's Jenna Levine, My Vampire Plus One. First book was My Vampire Roommate. Um, I'll admit, paranormal romance is not my first choice when it comes to reading. I have read them and loved some of them, but I'm not a dedicated paranormal romance reader. But I love Jenna's book. In this particular one, Amelia Collins is an insurance actuary. Her life is very ordered. She's very successful. Her career, everything's going on track, except Amelia's relatives keep nagging her about when she's going to find a good man and settle down. So in desperation, it's one of those points where she's been invited to a family wedding. She doesn't have a date. She's struggling to figure out what to do. She figures, well, what's the worst I can do if I invite someone just to pretend to be my boyfriend? She kind of It's one of those meet cute rom-com things. She met a guy outside her company's office. They bumped into each other. They were um, had that kind of hit their heads, kind of angry at each other, both thinking it was the other person's fault. And she sees this guy who turns out to be Reginald Cleves in a coffee shop. So just in a moment of desperation, she goes up to him and says, "Would you agree to be my date for this wedding? And I will do a favor for you in return." Well, Reginald is more than happy to help Amelia out because he's been kind of interested by her. But what Amelia doesn't know is Reginald brings a lot of baggage with him because he's not just your average guy going for a date, he is a vampire. So that's the premise of the story. What I love about Jenna's books is she introduces some kind of literary element to the story. In her first book, My Vampire Roommate, the two main characters exchanged letters because they were roommates with each other, but they didn't see each other that often. So you got that epistolatory element to the romance story. In My Vampire Plus One, Reginald, who's this outrageous kind of quirky character, wants to get in touch with his feelings to be better as a human. So he starts journaling, bullet journaling. So there's little samples of his bullet journals throughout them. If you like humorous paranormal romances, this is definitely the book for you.
That sounds like candy to me.
I mean, normally I'm not a vampire romance reader, and it's very, if you're looking for heavy duty, kind of the darker Lindsay Sands kind of romance paranormals, this is not for you. It's very much more lighter on the humor spectrum side.
I'm going to totally check those out. And I think some people in our audience are as well.
She's got a great website too, so you can always
Oh,
connect with her.
you know what? Charlene has a good question. I'm like with this too, is that do you have to read those ones in order? I read everything in order, so it doesn't matter, but like for other people that aren't as
Technically, no. Each book has a separate couple that she focuses on. She's going to have a third book, which comes out next year. I mean, in a perfect world, I would say read the first one and then the second one. But I think you're perfectly fine if you can't find the first one, starting with My Vampire Plus one. The author talks a little bit about the protagonist because the woman is friends with the woman in the first book, that so they kind of know each other that way. And Reginald knows the vampire hero from the first book because they're friends. But it's not necessary, but I know there are some people that have to read everything in order. So, yes, if it drives you crazy, read them in order. If you can't find them, you'll be perfectly fine.
yeah, yeah, I'll wait. But Charlene, you go for it.
My next one is another debut. It's called Birding with Benefits by Sarah T. Dubb. In this particular book, Celeste Johansson is kind of in a new place in life. She's willing to experience new things. She wants to try things out. She's left behind a romance, a love, a marriage that didn't work out for her. So she's open to possibilities. So when a friend asked her if he would be willing to be a partner with another person he works with, Celeste thinks, oh, he wants her to be his date for some kind of function or something like that. But when she shows up for a meeting with John, it turns out he doesn't want a partner in that sense. He needs someone to help him compete in the Arizona Ornithological Society's upcoming bird binge contest. So he doesn't need her as a romantic partner, he needs her as a bird watching partner. So that's kind of the premise that sets it up. But what I love about this debut is we have older protagonists. They're both in their 40s and their 50s. They're not the younger protagonists that you see in many romances. It's got this wonderful, I'll be honest, I think bird watching is a bore, but even I was fascinated by the snippets that the author puts into the story. It's really interesting how she incorporates that hobby into things. And she's very good with her Arizona setting. I can definitely see that she knows what she's talking about. So if you're looking for a debut, something a bit different, older protagonists, interesting kind of hook, in this case, bird watching, Birding with Benefits by Sarah T. Dubb.
I love it. I like authors that take something that we don't normally think of as romantic and include it in a romance, you
Yeah.
know. I mean, if you think about bird watching, you're out there in nature for hours at a time, just kind of waiting for a bird to come by. It's a good time to meet somebody.
I can't wait to see what she does next.
Probably alligator wrestling or something.
Well, maybe something with cactus since it's Arizona, but you
Oh,
never know. Many readers, many people might know Vanessa Kelly from her
mhm.
historical romances. Her new book is called Murder in Highbury. In this case, she's moving into historical mystery. But I want to mention this because I was so impressed. It's based on Jane Austen's Emma. And what Vanessa does is she takes Emma, this is after Emma's married Nightberry, and they're living in their small town, and she comes to the church to help prepare the flowers with her friend, and she discovers a body. It happens to be the vicar's wife on the steps of the church, and she doesn't know what to do because the local constable, who's kind of an idiot, is determined to pin the murder on Emma's friend, but Emma knows it can't be him. So she kind of pairs up with her husband to some degree to solve the murder. So it's basically a murder mystery with a romantic couple. Think Nick and Nora Charles from the movies. It's got that kind of feel, but it's Regency England. I do like it because Vanessa is very true to Austen's characters. She doesn't make them do something that's totally out of character, but she takes them in a new direction. It's the first of a new series. So if you like a historical mystery with a little bit of romance, Murder in Highbury by Vanessa Kelly is perfect.
Can I ask you a question, John, that kind of came up in the Q&A a little while ago? Is I noticed that you've sprinkled in books of like Hanukkah and LGBTQ characters and things like that. Are you finding that there's more of that that's well written that you review
Yeah.
well?
Compared to like 5, 10 years ago, yeah, definitely. I think there definitely has been an increase, especially in LGBTQ romances. I'm surprised at the number of sapphic romances that are now being published every month. They're really hot. But even other kinds of diversity, whether it's religious diversity for holiday romances or ethnic diversity, um, Harlequin, I think, has been trying. I wouldn't say they're 100% there yet, but they've been incorporating some diverse characters into their series romances, which I think is admirable. What I would say, and this is probably preaching to the choir when I tell you and those tuning in, is that it's kind of one of those catch-22 situations. If readers don't buy the books with diverse characters, publishers won't publish them because they don't see the financial incentive. So if you like this different kind of story, if you want to see more of a range or depth, you need to purchase the books for your libraries. You need to purchase them yourselves. You need to give them as gifts because that's the only way that we keep this thing going.
Mhm. But as a reviewer, do you feel because libraries tend to not buy books unless they've been reviewed by Kirkus or Publishers Weekly or something like that. Not to say that that's right, and more libraries are becoming more diverse in that sense too. But how do we make sure that we know about them?
Well, there's lots of different ways. You mentioned professional reviews. You can also sign up for publisher newsletters. I know the last thing that any of us need is more email in our digital e-books, but publishers are really doing a good job. St. Martin's Press,
Mhm.
Berkeley, they'll send you, they sometimes daily, but sometimes it's once a week, forthcoming announcements about new books. And again, it's coming from the publisher, so take it with a grain of salt. Not every book they publish is perfect, but that will kind of increase your awareness of that. Um, I'm sure there's websites out there that probably specialize in the more diverse kinds of romances. I know for a long time, RWA had a chapter that did that, though RWA is now pretty much in disarray, but your local chapter might be a good option if you have an RW chapter locally or things like that. That would be my first suggestions.
Okay, yeah, because you know, it people like jumped into the zeitgeist like, Kennedy Ryan. She's so popular and she's
Mhm.
so wonderful and such a good writer.
Yeah,
And somebody said Goodreads as well. Um, but sometimes it's hard to find like a larger, like
yeah,
more people, um,
yeah,
other than those ones that are getting all the highlight.
yeah. It's definitely keeps us on our toes, doesn't it, Mina?
Yes. And I think, I'm going to say this, you guys are the choir here, but we need to do our own research too. We can't just depend on people sending us information. We need to get out there and look for what we
Mhm.
want to read as well.
Well, yeah, that's why workshops like the ones you offer are a great advantage to libraries in the Massachusetts area, and virtually, I guess people can sign up for them too, and things like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we have people from all over the country here. But yeah, it's nice to have somebody like you, John, to talk about the books that you've liked through the year because you are somebody who has read extensively and can give us like a good, honest review, something reputable.
Well, that's nice of you to say. And again, it's just my opinion. There's lots of books out there that, like Richard Osman, that I'm not his number one fan, but other people will. So keep that in mind. And yeah, it's there's so many. I'm surprised there's so many good books out there. I think the more challenging part is how do you winnow down your list so you can get them into the collection.
Right. And that doesn't even get into AI. So let's shelve
Yes.
that for another day. But
Yeah.
I think we have time for like maybe two more reviews.
And more. Okay, let me do another one that was a total surprise to me. Joanna Lowell's A Shore Thing.
Oh, I've seen this book. What? Tell me all about
I never thought seaweed could be so sexy, but that's what I discovered in this book. It's just it's truly an amazing book. Kit Griffith has arrived in Cornwall. He's left his old life as Kate Holyrod behind him in London. So you have this character that's transitioning from one place in his life, one place in her life to another place in his life when he arrives in Cornwall. But what seems to have been happening to Kit now is he was an artist in London as Kate, but he can't find that inspiration, that artistic impulse. He's kind of at a loss. That's when he meets New York botanist Muriel Pendrake, who's in Cornwall looking for seaweed samples. She's been tasked to create a lecture for Americans. She's working on that, and she needs someone to do the illustrations for her lecture. So she hires Kit, and that's how they're kind of introduced, and that's the setup of the book. But it's got so many layers in it. There's this whole thing about bicycling clubs in Victorian England in the book. There's the botany aspect. There's this um, whole kind of really thoughtful exploration by the author as to how people in Kate's life now look at him when he's Kit. So there's a lot of different things in the story, but it's a romance. It's hard to describe, but it's unique and wonderful.
Oh, I love unique books like that. I mean, how many, like we said, how many Dukes can you possibly read about? So I love it.
Not that we don't like Dukes, but
Oh, I just read a book by Alexander Vosti, um,
yes,
near, near Duke.
Ne'er do well Duke. Yeah.
It was so good, so good.
I mean, I guess in many ways we are fortunate. There's so many wonderful books out there. I'll slip in one last one because I know you're crunched for time, but it's by a librarian, so I feel we have to promote those among us. It is a debut. It's called The Next Best Fling by Gabriela Gamez.
Mhm.
The heroine is also a librarian, Marcella Ortiz, and she never thought she would have something in common in a million years with Theo Young, but it turns out they do. Both of them are in love with someone else, and they happen to be in love with the same two people that are getting married to each other. So Marcella's in love with the bride. Yeah, Theo is in love with the bride. No, Marcel's in love with the bridegroom. Theo's in love with the bride, and they're at the wedding nuptial ceremony when they discover this fact, and they hatch a plot initially to try to break up the couple, but then they realize that's wrong. But they're tired of everyone looking at them, kind of pityingly, like, "Oh, poor Gabriella, poor Marcella, poor Theo," all these things. So they decide they'll participate in a fake relationship. So it's the fake dating kind of thing. And that's what sets up the premise of the story. And they, of course, they discover real feelings along the way. What I love about it is it's very honest about its depiction about working in a library. There's none of that kind of, oh, it's, you just kind of spend all your day reading books and then you check out two books and leave for the end of the day. No, there's a lot of real work involved in it. And I think that's because the author, Gabriella, has that experience working in the libraries. So if you're looking for, it's definitely on the steamy side. If you're looking for a steamy contemporary romance, interesting library setting, fake dating leading to real feelings, The Next Best Fling by Gabriella Gamez is definitely a book to add to your list. It's her first book. She deserves lots of accolades.
Well, I'm thinking there might be some love in the stacks in that book.
There you go.
No spoilers, but if there's not at least one scene, you
In the
know,
library.
I'd be surprised. Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you, John. This has been fabulous. I think we have a very, very long TBR pile to be adding to our current TBR piles. And I don't know if you've been able to see the chat at all, but it's been fabulous with so many good recommendations and some really good chatter about the books that we're reading. So I appreciate everybody that's been here. And John, I'm gonna put you on my calendar for the first Monday of next December.
Well, thank you.
I'm just gonna assume you're free.
I pretty much I am, sadly, but no, I appreciate the offer. I love talking books with you and everyone else. That's what I miss most about the library world, though we have it to some extent in the bookstores too. And I appreciate how thoughtful you are about the romance genre.
Well, I love chatting with you because you are somebody who brings books to me that I might not normally, but also you've talked about some books that I have been wanting to read or have read recently that so I'm like, I feel like I'm going to start following you, John.
Oh,
Okay.
this is my other guilty, terrible secret that will go viral. I'm not on the internet, so
I know, but I do know I can follow you in Booklist, like
you
follow,
can
like
definitely.
your
Yes,
recommendations. So
there
I'm
you
all
go.
there. But yes, thank you so much. I will be in touch, and you're going to send me the list so that I can send it out to
Yes.
everybody.
Mhm.
And I really appreciate everybody who's been here and has given me a good laugh throughout the last hour. Just
Yes.
needed that. So
Humor is helpful.
definitely have a wonderful night, everybody, and happy reading.
Thank you.
Good night, John.
Thank you, Mina.